pleasure to have you all today here with us for the second part of our Making Gains series. We have a power pack discussion prepared for y'all, as well as some merch to give out to the most engaged participants in day 2 of our Making Gains event. Now, I'll begin with some introductions because more than likely you haven't seen my face or you don't know what FBLA is or stands for. So my name is Shay Mendez. I'll be the moderator for day 2 of the Making Gains discussion. And I'm the president of Dr. Phillips High School Future Business Leaders of America chapter. And I'm also a dual enrolled student at Valencia College and Dr. Phillips High School, majoring in political science and international business law. So what is Future Business Leaders of America, right? It's the high school division of Future Business Leaders of America Phi Beta Lambda, Inc. And what do? We help high school students prepare for careers in business through academic competitions, through leadership development, and educational programs. We also just came from competition season. I got to shout out my members for ranking first in practically all our categories. A round of applause for them. All right, so now I've said a lot, just simply in the introduction myself, but y'all just got to wait because we have, like I said, a whole panel here to talk to you. So let's begin with Dr. Tiffany Blockson. I will add her to the stream now. Dr. Blockson is originally from West Palm Beach, Florida. She completed her medical education at HU in Washington, D.C. Dr. Blockson then went on to complete her residency training. Dr. Blockson relocated to Hunter's Creek and joined Merchant Pediatrics in 2010. And in her own words, she says, "Since I was a child, I felt that being a pediatrician was my calling. Children are so precious, and what greater joy is there than to make a child feel better? Being a pediatrician gives me a chance to impact the future by providing not only health care, but by also being a mentor, a confidant, and a confidant, and a friend." And that is exactly what she has been to me. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is definitely an honor.
Of course. And next up, we have Commissioner Regina Hill. She's a staunch advocate and supporter for the residents of District 5 and City of Orlando. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, and it's an honor to be here also on this distinguished panel, and I'd like to thank the future leaders.
Of course. We're glad to have you. Now, Commissioner Regina Hill is committed to the advancement and the creation of community-enriching projects, policies, and proactive solutions. So with humble beginnings, she was born in Tavares, Florida. Is that how you pronounce it?
Correct.
Tavares, Florida. She grew up in the Paramore area of Orlando and matriculated through the Orange County Public School System. Commissioner Hill served her country by enlisting in the United States Navy. And to fulfill her desire to help and serve others, she has aided individuals for the past 25 years as a nurse. And since taking office in 2013, Commissioner Hill has advocated for more jobs, for education opportunities, for business development, for affordable housing in District 5, and more. Specifically, she spearheaded activities of Orlando Blueprint, Turner School of Construction job training, Paramore Comprehensive Neighborhood Plans, Soccer Stadium, Paramore Village, Community Gardens, Wells Built House Rehabilitation, and Paramore Linmo BRT Project, among many others. I tell y'all, we got a powerful panel here. My goodness. Now, we're going to add to the stream. We have Representative Anna Escamani.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, of course. And it's Anna or Anna?
It's Anna. You got it perfect.
Yeah. Okay, like Frozen.
Exactly.
Perfect. Now just going by how you came into the stream, you're bold and an unapologetic fighter for Florida families and everyday people. Born and raised in Orlando, Representative Escamani, she is the daughter of working-class immigrants who came to Florida from Iran in search of the American dream. She went to Orange County Public Schools and then to UCF, and she earned dual degrees, which is what I'm hoping to do, so that would be a good conversation, as an undergrad and graduate student. She works as a nonprofit professional and is now getting her PhD in public affairs. I assume that that's been completed.
Still at it, girl. I hope to finish this year.
Okay, good. Now, bridge builder, Anna flipped her legislative seat in 2018 and won her re-election by an overwhelmingly majority in 2020. Then she made history as the first Iranian American elected to any public office in Florida, and has championed since then critical issues like economic justice, environmental protection, equality for all, funding for public schools, human trafficking, and sexual assault prevention. Thank you for being here with us. We also have here with us today Mr. Desmond Meade. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. One of our two, no, you're not. I had to bring this up. You're one of our two official Instagram accounts, the little check mark. I was like, what? You're a representative. Come on. Like, oh, whoa. But you are a civil rights activist working to change disenfranchisement laws and other barriers preventing formerly incarcerated citizens from fully participating in civic life. Formerly incarcerated people face restrictions in housing and education, financial assistance, and in some states, the access to basic democratic liberties such as the right to vote, to hold public office, and to even obtain professional licenses is also curtailed. Now, as executive director of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, or FRRC, and a returning citizen himself, Meade understands firsthand the stigma people with prior convictions face, along with the perception that they are unfit for involvement in democratic governance. So, thank you for being here with us today. Again. Now we have also with us Mr. Eddie Harris, as well as Commissioner George Oliver of ACOE. I'm going to pull up their bios as well and read it on. We have Commissioner here of District 5 in the city of ACOE, George Oliver. And I'll just break down his education, his business involvement, etc. Commissioner, you got a long list. My goodness, his education includes 2 associate degrees in legal studies from Valencia College. That was in transactional litigation. He has a bachelor's degree in business management from the University of Phoenix, an MBA from the University of Phoenix. And as for business, he was a battalion legal officer in the United States Navy. So he was involved just as we have Commissioner Hill. He was the chief information officer for volume services for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the executive manager of training for Productivity Point International in Central Florida. Lastly, certainly not least, we have Mr. Eddie Harris, and I'm going to pull up your bio here. Oh, come on. See this? I have you look unprepared. Hold on 1 minute.
What an amazing panel you got together.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, of course. Mr. Eddie Harris, now you're just going to have to tell them about yourself.
My name is Eddie Harris, Jr. I'm a retired itinerant elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. I'm a longtime resident of Central Florida, though I'm living in Sanford now. I've spent a great portion of my life in Orlando, serving the community, working out of the mayor's office, etc. But I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama for a greater portion of my life during the Montgomery bus boycott. So that's where I cut my teeth on addressing civil disobedience and injustice and things of that nature, and a keen sense of community. Graduated from Jones High School, class of 1968.
Go Tigers.
Hey, that's right, Commissioner. You know this. Matriculated to Valencia and got an associate's degree. Left there after a while and went to Orlando College, got a bachelor's degree in business administration. Time later, went to Atlanta, Georgia, to the Interdenominational Theological Center, where I got my Master of Divinity, and completing my doctorate. I'm ABD, and I know that I just heard somebody, Representative Escamani, she's finishing up her PhD, so hang in there. I got you. I understand fully, so I'm ABD. But what I do now is what I've always done, and it's always about people first. I am a servant leader. I don't need fanfare. I just need to get the job done with some people who are community oriented. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, even though she has all 15 pages of my bio. That's a joke. It's only Commissioner Hill, that's a joke. She only has 2 paragraphs.
No, because now I got it pulled up. He is the former chairman of the city's community revitalization committee, which is the catalyst for the Paramore District Revitalization Initiative. And Mr. Eddie Harris, you were the former founder and owner of an independent record label and African American Gallery. So you see here we got a powerful group here. Now I'm going to pull up our questions. And I only ask that we limit our responses to 2 minutes, because the way we've organized this is for every panelist present here today, you have 2 to 3 personalized questions to your industry, to your career, to your journey. And then near the end, we have about 10 to 15 minutes reserved for group questions. And with those types of questions, it's really one-on-ones. We've connected each of your journeys together. So just like we make those connections between Commissioner Hill and Commissioner Oliver, both participating in the Navy. And so we made those types of connections to form the group questions. So now we'll get into it. First up, Dr. Bloxman. A question here for you is, what role has self-care played for you as a doctor during the pandemic? And just how have you done it? How have you done it?
Well, thank you for asking. I'll be honest, it's been difficult. In the beginning of the pandemic, there were a million unknowns. One of the things that was helpful for me is that I'm a little tech savvy. So while it was very difficult for some of my colleagues, I had to stay on and start our telemedicine aspect of the office. So I initiated that through our EMR, and I had to really find out how to integrate that into our day-to-day office practice and try to reach as many patients as we could without obviously risking other people getting sick. So, there were a lot of new challenges. I also started as chair of pediatrics at Osceola Regional at the same moment that this pandemic was just blossoming. So making time for self-care was very difficult, especially with 2 young children also. But I realized that one thing that this pandemic taught me is that mental health and taking care of yourself so you can be available for others is extremely important. So I tried to get more into spending more quality time with my kids and, taking on some more difficult cases, but really, organizing my schedule as such so that I still have time to make it home for dinner.
My God, we appreciate that. And you have to be 100 in order to give it your all at work.
Right.
So definitely understand that. So now, Commissioner Hill, you have rocked so many beautiful styles throughout your career. You got like protective styles, long, braided. So my question for you really is, how has wearing natural Black hair, in your professional opinion, and just reflecting on the years that you've been in politics, how has wearing natural Black hair become a civil rights issue in the U.S.?
Oh, well, actually, I started out as a nappy blonde. And I'll be honest with you, I met a lot of obstacles being my natural self. People thought that when I first decided to run for office, I needed Black hair and it needed to be long and bobbed and I needed pearls. Well, I was someone that came out with nappy blonde hair. They told me there was no way I could represent the city with natural blonde nappy hair. And for 6 or 7 years, I wore it because I decided I am not my hair, I am the work. And so I've transitioned in the office to now I have longer, natural, got a little, little extensions. And I wear my braids, but I have always decided if you're going to judge me on my hair, uh, you're already off at the wrong start because we have to be comfortable in our own skin.
Yeah.
So I judged myself and did not allow others to judge me by what they thought I should be because of a hairstyle. So I rock what I want to rock, and I go out there and do the work for the people, and that should be enough.
It should be enough. And speaking of knowing what to rock, I got a question.
And I apologize if I was so blunt, but it never had been a problem rocking natural black hair. It's always been a problem when people are doing something out of the norm. They see a black woman with burgundy hair or whatever, and they say she's ratchet or she's hood and might have a PhD. She just prefer whatever her style is. So I think that's what the issue is in our black community and brown community when it comes to politics and different professions if they try to put you in a box.
That's right.
Amen.
And for speaking on the topic of just going outside the box, I have a quote, or not even a quote, but a phrase that a role model of mine, Elaine Welteroth, that she mentioned in her book, and it was first only different, or being an FOD. And I'll pull up more context here. But what stood out to me when she had mentioned that was just the pressure that is put on, especially young adults at this point, because when you think of activism, when you think of change, you think of young change makers like Greta leading movements with thousands of kids following behind them, and that's a lot of pressure. And so when you even hear first only different, you think of young change makers like that, and that can be a lot of pressure. So my question for Representative Escamani, first referencing your educational background, earning dual degrees as an undergrad and graduate student, heavily being involved in the performing arts as a theater tech, having your inspiration with your AP government teacher during your senior year. Just what is your advice for young change makers having that perspective on change making, having that experience in that type of pressure?
Yeah, well, thank you again for having us. And I just want to say, as an ally to Black Lives, I'm just so humbled to be in this space with all of you. You know, we're coming together to mark the power of Black History Month, and as we gather, the Florida legislature is moving in the opposite direction, actually trying to erase history and not allow students to be their authentic selves and hear about the past challenges of our history and the dark moments in our history, but the courage and bravery exhibited by Floridians, including Floridians in this room today. And so I just want to express my solidarity and gratitude to be invited to the space. And thank you so much again, Shay, for all your leadership. You're such an impressive young leader, and it gives me a lot of hope for the future. And I think that's a great segue to answer your question. You know, I have always been told as a young person to wait your turn, that you don't know enough, or honestly, as a woman and a woman of color, you know, more emphasis, as the commissioner was speaking to, you know, more emphasis on how you look and how you talk versus what you're saying or what you're doing. So you're always up against the status quo in these spaces, and young people feel that even more, because you're seeing all the community challenges and you want to take action on it. And yet there's people in the room telling you that you don't know enough to actually have a positive impact. And so what I find to be so impressive about Generation Z and this next generation of young people who are blossoming into leaders is that you actually know a lot more than many of us did at a very young age. And that's in part due to technology. You know, technology and social media has really made information travel much faster. But at the same time, you know, technology allows you to not just take in information, but also allows you to transform that information to social change and to, you know, lead a petition or an Instagram campaign, or get folks to call a lawmaker or call a city official about a specific issue. And so I really encourage folks to, especially young people, it's always important to ask for guidance, but you should trust your gut. Because at the end of the day, you know what is right and wrong. You know what you're most passionate about. And you shouldn't allow people to stop you from doing that. And of course, I really encourage folks to pace themselves. I think I look back at my life, and my mom passed away when I was a kid. So I grew up really fast at an early age. And I kind of wish I had more time to just be a kid. So I do encourage folks to, that self-care that the doctor already mentioned, like you got to make sure you integrate that self-care into your routine, but also don't be afraid to take that risk or to challenge the status quo, because if you know something needs to change and you have a passion for it, there's no reason why you should delay.
We had spoken on that yesterday. I had asked one of the panelists, just how do you find your niche, your passion? And she said it starts with finding your story and then knowing your story. And the conversation grew from there, because we started talking about just being a kid, being in this season right now. We're filling out applications for programs. We're filling out applications for internships. And the common question is like, what social or political issues do you notice in your community? How would you change it? What are your passions? How are you using those passions to lead your own initiatives? And so that was just a really important point that you brought up that I just wanted to add on to, was just knowing your passions, because then you can just find the career that fits best for you. Now, when I mentioned first only different, interestingly, that was a term that was actually coined by Shonda Rhimes, not my role model, but maybe she had just mentioned it in her book. But a little bit more on what that means. An FOD in your field, she says, comes with a unique responsibilities and a potent opportunity to rewrite the rules, to redefine norms, to represent for the communities that haven't had a seat at the table before you pulled out the chair. But what good is a trailblazer who isn't willingly to leave signposts along the way to make everything a little less confusing, a little less lonely, a little less disorienting for the next woman of color? So my question for you, Mr. Eddie Harris, is you opened and ran the very first dual enrollment program of Orlando's secondary HBCU, Jones High School.
Yes.
So what does it take to be the first, or to become the first in any industry or profession that us young adults pursue?
I don't know what it takes to become the first, but I know what it's like to be the first. I didn't volunteer to be the first, but I willingly volunteered to serve. I think that if you want to be, philosophically, if you want to be a leader, a good leader, I suspect then that you must have been a great follower. You can't lead folks somewhere where you've never been, or you have no inkling as to where you're going or how to get there. Being a part, I've always been pro-education. And being an alumnus of Jones High School, I knew what education was. Education was not just notebooks, pencils, and pens and taking home homework, but our education was family. Our teachers were our family. I mean, our teachers lived down the street, next door, around the block from us. So we were a village, if you will, if I could use that example. And that helped shape and form it and inform me on what kind of leader I would be in the capacity where I could give back. I was literally thrust in a position, a God-given position, where I was able to give back to a myriad of students in the same place where I got all of who I am today. Has every much to do with the teachers and the counselors and the supporters of Jones High School as anything else. They were my foundation layers, if you will. And being able to lead in the capacity that I was afforded, I was just a vessel pouring into so many other students. I think that one of the things that make me feel good about that one experience is that I have countless, Commissioner Hill was out there then. I don't recall if she was one of my dual enrollment students, but she was one of my students at the school. I poured into so many children, young people, what had been given to me, and they've gone exponentially higher, which is the way it's supposed to be. And they've done great things and continue to do great things. And many of them left and forged great careers, and they came back and they're pouring back into the Orlando, Central Florida community. So I think a good leader has to have that spiritual ripple effect, that what's poured into you, remember, you don't own it. You're just a steward or guardian of it, and then you begin to pour when you're thrust in the same position or afforded the same opportunity that I have. Leadership is servitude. It's not It's not about you. It's never about you. It's always about the people of whom you're trying to impact. So that's how I line up with all of this.
All right. Anybody want to add? We had a lot of that yesterday.
All right.
No, you're good. But speaking of foundational layers, one thing that does come to mind is networking and mentorships. And in an article I read featuring Commissioner Oliver, he had reflected on some mentors of his, including his father and some people from the civil rights movement. And so, my question, really, for you, Commissioner Oliver, is what are your tips for young adults? What are your tips for young adults as it concerns networking in this pandemic, and how can they really build relationships?
One thing I would like to say is the fact that Mr. Harris, he touched on a lot of key points. The first thing I want to identify is that I am a product of a Future Business Leaders of America prodigy. I'm a product of those programs. In high school, I went to high school in Atlanta, Georgia, Charles Lincoln Harper High School, where I actually participated in as one of the I was actually the vice president of the Future Business Leaders of America, thanks to Mr. Uri, who's now gone away. He's left us now, but he actually was a part of my foundation, along with some very famous civil rights leaders. And I think that I was very blessed as I was coming up to be able to meet and correspond, and also spend time with people like Hosea Williams, people like Dr. Joseph Lowry, Benjamin E. Mays, Mayor Maynard Jackson, as well as Andrew Young. These are some people that I would see almost on a regular basis, and those were the ones that was pouring into me, preparing me for life and the roles that I was able to take advantage of and be a part of a community. And I love the way Mr. Harris put it, where he was saying that being a leader is not about you. It's not about me. Being a leader was about showing the people of Ocoee a different way, showing them what I was exposed to. I was exposed to leaders that got their hands dirty, that rolled their sleeves up. I've seen them fill potholes on the streets. I was exposed to leaders that really got in the community and poured everything they had into the youth, into the working class African Americans in our city, and I was able to do that and be exposed to that, and be able to now take that and transform that into where I'm at now. Because again, being a leader was not about me. Being the first African American city commissioner was not about me. It was about the people of Ocoee, and being proud of them to let them know that they let basically Orange County know that we're ready for change. So it wasn't about me, it was about them, and it was about me being able to serve the people of Ocoee. Now, when it comes to our young leaders, as you know, that I am very passionate about youth programs and pouring in the youth and also paying it forward. So I always say reach back to pay it forward. So one of the things that I'm always encouraging young folks to do is to go outside the box, or if you're already there, stay outside the box, or create that box. You create the box and let folks come inside your box to see exactly what you're capable of. The world to you right now is a blank canvas. You can paint the world any way you want to paint this world. So now, if you want to paint this world with butterflies, unicorns, and sunsets, or whatever that may be, whatever you picture this world to be, whatever change you want to see in this world, you paint that canvas the way you want that canvas to be painted. You allow others to admire your vision of what you want this world to be, and be a part of that change. Be more proactive in what you do. And also, the thing about it, we have a responsibility as not only elected officials, but community leaders, community servants, to make sure that we take every opportunity that we have to instill what we have learned and what our mentors have poured into us, to pour back into our youth in the city. So again, in our cities, in our communities, also in this nation. So again, I'm always encouraging young folks to be a part of the change that you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
You're muted.
Can't hear you.
There you go. But you once said change never happens until people engage in change. And reading an article, you reflected on the time you're moving to a COE, and your wife said, I heard all the stories about a COE, and you said, but we need to be a part of that change. You don't have to do any more than just move there. We can get involved with some community activities. And I love that story, because it just goes to show how a small decision, like small or large, a decision like that has led you to make history, and for you to take on a perspective like that and saying it wasn't about me, it was really about the impact that I was leaving on the community and on the generations following is impactful. And speaking of change, we have a change maker here, Mr. Desmond Meade. And my question for you is, how do you give those formerly incarcerated a chance at change? Because we know that when people are incarcerated, they're stripped mentally, they're stripped physically, emotionally. And so how do you work with them to make gains as they're put back into society?
Well, thank you for that question, Shay. And I think it's probably a small part about how I may work to ensure that people with felony convictions are successfully reintegrated. And I think the larger part is how we as a community, right, how we're approaching this, and it's so easy to fall into this trap, or to this narrative that's been out here for so long, that it's a narrative that basically dehumanizes people and desensitizes us to their humanity. It's the same narrative like the United States used prior to bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? That painted the Japanese as violent, dangerous people, and when they did eventually drop the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, rather than there being public outrage, there was actually celebration in the street. And think about it, a narrative so powerful that it would cause people to celebrate the murder of innocent women, children, and men, right? And that's that same type of narrative that's been in existence in this country for quite some time. That narrative that generally says that some people's lives are less valuable than others. It's that narrative that says that African Americans are dangerous, that they're uneducated, that at one point we were called super predators, right? Right, and all that did was just dehumanize the individual. But when we look at people who've been caught up in the criminal justice system, at the end of the day, first and foremost, they're human beings. Second of all, they're someone's father, mother, sister, brother, uncle, cousin, nephew. Right, and these are people, in spite of what they may have been charged with, are worthy of being treated with dignity and respect. One of the ways we try to shift that narrative is that we try to get rid of even the phrase felons, right, or convicts, right? Why should it be that a person would have to wear that scarlet letter of shame for the rest of their lives, right? And that's a word that actually seeks to dehumanize. Just to give an example, when you think of an immigrant is one thing, but you put the word illegal next to it, it kind of desensitizes people, right? And so we have to push back against it. We as a community have to understand that it is vital. It is vital for us to ensure that individuals who've been impacted by the criminal justice system have an effective way of successfully reintegrating back into their community. It's in our own self-interest to make sure that it happens. And so, as we're talking about the different barriers that returning citizens face, whether it's participating in democracy, whether it's having ability to fully participate in our economy, those are some real things that we can help to change just simply by shifting the way we're viewing people who are impacted by the criminal justice system. And I end with this. Most folks have heard the adage that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, that no matter how much weight you may want that chain to bear, it could only bear as much weight as that weakest link could stand. Right. And I believe that that's the same in our communities. That's the same in this state of ours, even this country, that if we want our communities to be greater, then we must be committed to empowering those in our community that has been most weak by systems of oppression, systems of racism, and of course that narrative that devalues individuals' lives. And so it's I think it's not just returning citizens advocating for change. I think the community have to advocate for change and not get caught up in this narrative that causes us to despise our own or to dehumanize individuals who made mistakes. I got to end with this because I think it's so vital to this, and we have a lot of concerns in our community. One of the examples that I used in the past when I talked about Michael Vick, right, professional football player, he went to jail for fighting dogs, right, and in South Florida. Not only do we have dog fighting, we have cockfighting, right? And at the end of the day, if you ever know anything about these events, they are violent, right? They're bloody and gory. I mean, these dogs are fighting to the death, right? And I always ask people this question when I talk about this story: how many people got mad at the dogs? Nobody got mad at the dogs. What they got mad at was the people that created the systems in which these dogs were fighting. They got mad at the people that did things to encourage or facilitate the fighting of these dogs. The reaction to the dogs were that people was trying to find them loving homes, right? Now just think about how radical that is, right? That we don't get mad at the dogs. We try to find them loving homes. And what we direct our anger and our energy towards are the systems that are in place that create these conditions, right? And so the puppet masters would have us hating our own, right? It would have us hating our own, despising our own, when in reality, right, we need to love our own and understand that, listen, at the end of the day, they're still a human being. And a lot of these folks that we're seeing that are getting trapped up in the criminal justice system, right, are people who are whose lives are void of love, right, who's void of attention, and that needs that, right? And what we do is we go after these policies that don't allow people like me to get a job, that don't allow people like me to have safe and affordable housing, that don't allow people like me to vote, right? That don't allow people like me to feel like they're a part of the community. When we start learning to love the least among us, then we'll be able to love anyone.
Wow. Can I just say something on that? I just want to lift up a couple of pieces because you just did a dissertation. I mean, that was awesome. I've been following you, by the way, Brother Mead. You are an awesome one before us, and God bless you for that. You mentioned something that's near my political and social core about community, and you could not be clearer and more succinct on the necessity for us as a people, regardless as to what our race, ethnicity is. If our brothers and sisters and nephews and cousins and on are incarcerated and released back into the same community, of which helped get them incarcerated in the first place, then the recidivism rate certainly is going to always be high. But when we are positioned and dedicated and committed to changing our community, not just the physicality, but changing our community ideology and our mindset as to who it is we want to be as a community, then we can look at our brothers and sisters and cousins and nephews who are incarcerated and tap into their purpose and their potential. I've been following a couple of projects that would come on national news regularly now, and I've been watching the stream of information that's been flowing. And one of the things that really grasped me more than anything else, and my eyes welled up, when I saw brothers and sisters who had been incarcerated who had a skill set that would not allow them to get a job, but there are initiatives out there that would teach them how to become entrepreneurs. And I'm like, there's a shift in the community thinking and ideology. Everybody has potential. God made us. God created us in his image with his characteristics, with his gifts. We have those. They're not identical. Some are similar, but we have those in us regardless as to what missteps we have in life. We still have those potentials within ourselves. And when we have initiatives, and we have committed people like you, Brother Desmond. Listen, the truth of the matter is we need more people like you who are constantly out there rattling the horn and doing whatever you do to remind us we have to shift in our thinking from within ourselves. We can do more by looking inward. I believe this is my little 2 cents. We can do more for our brothers and sisters who have had missteps in life that look by looking inward than we can by looking for anything that's out there. And yes, there are viable, good resources, but when we come together and identify on a common cause and we work together in relationship for the greater good, when we work together in relationship with one another, realizing that each and every one of us has some God-given potential. And the question is, how do we exploit that? How do we make it better, not just for them, but for the community? Then these people show that they're overcomers. And that they overcame not just because it's what's in them, but because the village, the people around them shifted their thinking. And you touched on so much. I need to stop because you touched on so much that I'm acutely aware of, and I don't want to hog the time. But this is what I'm about. If we change our thinking,
Yes.
we change our behavior. If we change our behavior, we change our condition.
Wow, you about to get me started. That is so good. You know, I do believe that, especially when it comes to a return to citizens. First of all, you know, I think there have to be consequences for people's actions, right?
Absolutely.
But we have to understand, right, that at some point the punishment has to end, right? That's number one. And then second one, the connection there, right? And so when we fight, you know, one of the greatest things that I loved about the work that we've been doing, you know, a lot of people would automatically think, oh, it's because you passed Amendment 4, you know, 1.4 million people had the right to vote. But actually, one of the most proudest things that I am of our efforts over the last several years is the fact with our fines and fees program, right? How, you know, during the pandemic, you know, in spite of the legislature coming back and saying that people had to pay outstanding fines and fees, right? We didn't respond by attacking one side or the other. We didn't respond by crying about it. What we did was took the obstacle and turned it into an opportunity. We raised over $30 million and was able to pay out over $30 million in fines and fees across the state, right? But here's the beautiful part. When we were doing that, we were actually saving taxpayers' dollars, right? One example was in Brevard County, the clerk of court had a deficit, and they went to the commission to try to get them to rob Peter to pay Paul, the field legs deficit of $500,000. We were able to go there the very next week and give them a check for $528,000, right? And so we were saving people's jobs, right? While we were also creating a greater access to democracy. And in the process of doing that, we distributed over 1 million masks throughout the state of Florida in prisons, jails, homeless shelters, supervisor of elections office, over 500,000 ounces of sanitizer throughout the state. We gave tablets to nursing homes so people are able to communicate with their loved ones. And all of this, there's no other organization in the state of Florida that invested as much time and resources into the state of Florida than the very same organization that's made up of people who at one point were despised, wow. Right? And so the beauty of that is really relaying to people that when you advocate and you fight for the least among us, it benefits everybody. A rising tide lifts all boats. And so my safety, my peace is intimately tied to when Pookie come home, because 95% of people who are incarcerated will come back to their community. And so when Pookie come home, if he can get a job, if he can get safe and affordable housing, if he can get an education, right, then that means if he can vote and be a part of the community, that means I'm not going to be his next victim.
Wow. So not only that, if they can vote, they can lead. Because I remember I'm a convicted felon.
I
am. And when I decided to run, they did not see that I had been a nurse for over 25 years. They did not see that I had served my country. The only thing they saw was that I had some struggles earlier in my life, and they focused on the felon. But I'm proud today to say this felon has created over 1,400 affordable multifamily housing, have put job programs together, have worked with folks like Mr. Meade and the FRCC and many national representatives so that they can, hopefully I have changed the face of a felon, right? They looked at felons just like back. I remember when I was a nurse in the 90s, Dr. Bloxham, and they were looking at HIV and AIDS and looking at those folks and act as if they wasn't human. Nobody wanted to touch them. Nobody wanted to, even doctors and nurses decided they were going to push them in a corner and not give them care. And that's what they did to felons. As for, I believe, oh, you don't deserve how you don't deserve another chance. When in all essence, I believe our felons and our returning citizens, because everybody didn't go to prison. Some of us got probation or whatever, but still got that stigma. Is some of the most valuable assets in our communities, because they want a second chance. And if you give them a second chance, most times they're going to show you that they deserve it. And they're going to be the first one at work, the last one to leave. And not only, I don't want us just even focus on felons voting. I really believe that we have to put more felons in office, because they understand the struggles of society, what it means to be undermined and underrated. And they also, I believe, we need the equity when it comes to representing all people.
That's right.
Just because you had no issue, really, for me, I don't want. Minister Ayers,
Yes, ma'am.
I don't want to follow nobody that ain't went through something.
Thank you. Exactly.
I know that's right. And you know what? We all did. We all did. One thing I realized, even in this fight, is that in Florida, at one point, you could have lost the right to vote for the rest of your life. You lost your civil rights for releasing helium balloons in the air. How many of us have done that, right? Or disturbing turtle nesting eggs at a beach, or trespassing on a construction site because you're trying to take a shortcut to get back to work in time, before your lunch break is over. So many people have done something wrong. It's just that everybody ain't got caught, right? And getting caught, right? What's the difference between somebody committing a crime and not getting caught, and a person committing the crime and getting caught? What's the difference between those two people? At the end of the day. So we all have fallen short of some form of fact.
And I think Representative Escamani can note this, and something she's in Tallahassee fighting about and for, is that when I decided to turn my life around back in the early 90s, I was able to go before a board and petition to become a nurse and show where I had transitioned and the good work I had done in the community, and deserved an opportunity to care for my family and care for others. And now they've blocked almost everything for a returning citizen, and someone with a felon, even to become a barber, to become a hairstylist,
Right.
a certificate in painting, all these things that have blocked us from even trying to earn a fair living and wage. And that's why it's so important for this next generation. Most of them are social activists now, and that's a great thing, because we need more of that, because society in itself, and it doesn't matter the right, left, or middle, have decided that people of color and people that are disadvantaged really don't need to be at the table,
Right.
just on the menu.
Well,
Commissioner, I couldn't agree with you more. And it speaks to how not only is it discriminatory, but it's like this misconception of public safety. We have this hard on crime mentality, and I'm using air quotes for hard on crime. And Desmond knows this too from his advocacy and experience. Some of these punitive measures we have in criminal code, they don't keep our neighborhoods safe, and they do target, as you spoke so well to, people of color and poor people, and they end up destroying families. So much of our prison system are folks who are experiencing mandatory minimums, and they're in prison for years due to nonviolent drug offenses, due to cannabis charges. I mean, we have laws that have since changed in Florida, but because they're not retroactive, there are people sitting in our prisons, even though if they were arrested today, they would not be in prison. Like, that's how archaic and broken this system is. And I have had the opportunity as a state lawmaker to visit prisons in Florida and talk to the incarcerated face to face. And it's just unbelievable the lack of rehabilitation that's also invested in our prison system. And so you also have this problem of folks who are reoffending. And it's not, to some degree, it's so hard to avoid that because we don't set up people for success. They don't get an experience, rehabilitation in prison. Sometimes they shouldn't be in prison, and they actually become more disadvantaged in prison because prison also has drug addiction, and there's not enough staff. So sometimes there's instance of violence from correctional officers to inmates or between inmates. And so we have such a rigged system that is against a person's ability to build efficacy. And it's so important for us to break that stigma, amplify the stories of our returning citizens, and ensure that we redefine what public safety looks like in our communities. And I always tell folks that, for some different issues, especially with addiction, we shouldn't treat it as a crime. We should treat it as public health. And these are folks that, these are folks that do need an intervention, but that intervention doesn't have to be incarceration. Like, it can be a mental health path and a public health path. But of course, we as a community need to make those investments as well for those to be available for folks.
Yeah.
One of the things that come to mind is make no mistake about it. By the time most of our children of color, or children of African-American descent, by the time we hit first grade, we're already a part of a penal system. Our schools are designed as penal systems right now, because again, there's infractions and if you look at the entire system of a child going into school from kindergarten to first grade and on through the 12th grade, based on how they act or how they participate, they are actually being indoctrinated into a penal system. So we have to look at the root of the system. The root of the system starts when we come, as we're coming out of the womb, as these young children of color are coming out of the womb. The system is designed at that point to either identify who they're going to be based on their social economics, based on their environment, based on where they are, based on what schools they go to, based on where they are in life. The system is already designed to put them into a penal system that will condition them to understand that as I grow up and I go through this system, that going to jail and going to prison is just a part of how I grew up. And that right there itself is a big part of the problem right there. We have to be able to understand this system, and we have to reform our school system. Because again, I remember growing up, whenever there was a kid got into a fight or the case may be, they called the parents in, they worked it out. The principal was able to talk to the teachers and talk to the parents and work those things out. There was no infractions, no first degree or second degree or third degree infractions that we had to deal with, writing statements and police officers on our campuses to deal with the issues that children deal with today. And I think Representative Escamano, you made a point about mental health. Every child that acts up is not necessarily a mental case or have to be put on Ritalin or phenobarbital. Sometimes that child just simply needs a listening ear or just a mentor. So again, we're lacking those kind of things because, for one, we don't have the economics to deal with it, because most of the kids, a lot of the kids in certain environments don't have insurance, don't have access to insurance, so they can't go talk to a counselor, a top level counselor that some of their counterparts in other schools that don't look like them can do, or they don't have the family structure to be able to take advantage of some of the things that the other counterparts can take advantage of. So again, we have to be able to implement programs into our communities that will allow our children to be able to, one, express themselves, but also be able to help them to understand how they're feeling, be able to understand who they are, where they are, and the things that's going to be important to move them forward into our communities. So I think it starts a lot in our school systems from the time we hit kindergarten and first grade and being indoctrinated into that penal type system. And you got teachers that they watch kids fight in school every day, and they won't even pick up the radio to call for help. They watch it and say, this is the norm. And if the teachers are sitting back saying, this is the norm, what do you think the kids are going to do? They're going to say, well, this must be normal. This must be okay. And then you release them out into society, into our communities. And guess what? That same behavior that was acceptable to them in school, then it transcends out into our communities. And now we have a community of kids or young adults that think it's okay to be violent. It's okay to act out with your fist. Or then it escalates. Now it's okay to act out with a gun or a knife or a weapon. And it started so young. And to be honest with you, all it really needed was a fighting chance. Sometimes that fighting chance is just somebody, a community leader saying, or a teacher or a coach or someone say, hey, son, hey, young lady, sit down and come talk to me. What is going on? You would be amazed at those conversations, how they would change folks, their attitude and the way they act.
Well, plenty of something we don't want to admit in our Black community, and this is a problem, is mental health. It's going to take more than a talking to and a coach and a mentor. Yeah. Many of our children are dealing with generational trauma, and depression, and a whole lot of imbalances. Doctor, she's a pediatrics doctor, and we got to address that and stop sweeping mental health underneath the rug as if it don't exist. We can't pray this thing away, and we can't talk it away.
We have to be able to deal with it head on. You're absolutely right, Commissioner.
And there has been, I have had to do additional training just in mental health because there are very few resources for mental health. And so what you're dealing with is an increase in stress, decreased access, even for people who usually had good access. It has diminished greatly because even the people who are supposed to be helping are also dealing with mental stress. Mm-hmm. And so it really, does take a lot of people I try to encourage some of my young people. You want to do psychology? Great. We need more people who look like us to talk to. There's 2% of physicians are Black women.
Wow.
It is so hard. I've had people come. I've been doing this for 11 years. I've had people say, I've never seen a Black female doctor. Now, I went to Howard University College of Medicine, so I know that there's a bunch of us out there, but in the grand scheme of things, there is not. Now, I can only imagine how few mental health people of color there are. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a mom, a dad, a father who may be incarcerated, a mom who's depressed and juggling all of this, a grandma who's saying, hey, no, you're not crazy. You don't need to talk to anybody. You just need to go to church and pray about it. No. It creates an issue. And so we do also, I agree that we need to give mental health its due and know that it is real. And yes, not everything is fixed with medicine. Some people need medicine, but as a tool to bridge them until they learn the skills to manage on their own. And some people, many of the same people who end up going to jail for cannabis, and they are self-medicated. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to my son. My youngest son deals with mental health, and he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And when he was able to finally get the help that he needed, he sat down and told me, and it broke my heart. He said, Dad, I've been dealing with this since I was about 8 years old. I just did not have the mental capacity to tell you what was really going on with me. And it wasn't until he was 21 years old with a diagnosis that he was able to go back, get the right help he needed to go back to when he was 8 years old to tell me exactly what was going on with him. He's hanging off a rope, and he says dangling over a cliff and holding on for dear life from the time he was 8 years old. And he said the only thing that helped him when he hit about 13 was smoking marijuana to try to keep that grip. And finally, when he hit 17, he fell off that cliff because the marijuana didn't work anymore. So now they think it's a drug problem. It wasn't a drug problem. He said, Dad, it was a mental issue that I needed to figure out what was going on with me. And once I got that help, now I'm able to realize what are my triggers. I don't need the marijuana, but I need this certain medication, and I need to understand where I am and understand what my triggers are and what I need to do, the exercise I need to do to bring myself back.
And I just like to share this video really quick. It's a video I saw from social media, and it kind of parallels the conversation that we're having now. And I'll share my screen here. It's a spoken word video called Simon Says.
The game is Simon Says. You know how it goes. When Simon says do an action, you do an action. But you're only supposed to do an action if Simon says. Ready? Simon says, raise your right hand. Simon says, put your right hand down. Simon says, raise your left hand. Put your left hand down. Oh, Simon didn't say. Y'all look good. Okay, Simon says, put your left hand down now. Cross your arms. No. Simon didn't say cross your arm. You need to make sure you're listening. Okay. Simon says, smile. Show us your teeth. You're only as valuable as you are able. Simon says, raise your right hand again. Wave. Why are you waving? You don't know how to listen? You must not be a good listener at home. Simon says it's not time for a bathroom break. You go when Simon says. Eat when Simon says. Leave this room when Simon says. There's only one rule. Only do what Simon says. Simon says only speak when you are told to speak. Simon says, speak to your neighbor now. Why isn't everyone speaking now? You chose to play this game, now you're choosing not to play. How dare you ruin it for everyone else? Simon says it's still not time for a bathroom break, and stop asking. Simon says you're not listening. People that don't listen will never be successful. You know what? They don't even care. They don't. Just take out a book and shut up. Read. Simon said read. Simon says it's time to file in the hallways now. One behind the other. Straight silent line. Tight to the right. Simon says if you can't be silent, how will you hear what Simon is telling you to do? Silence. I said be silent. Simon said be silent. Simon said only 20 minutes to eat your lunch and be silent. Eat faster. Eat faster. Simon said sit up straight and be still. Simon says tuck in your uniform. You don't want to tuck in your uniform? Go sit in the corner. Simon says if you can't handle this classroom, how will you handle your jail cell? Simon says you will refer to it as Officer Simon from here on. And Officer Simon says know your place. All right.
Okay. May I?
Yes, please.
So I want to go back to Representative Escamani and Brother Desmond's piece because it's important. And I love what you just did because it was a good segue. The question is, why aren't we listening? When the institutions tell our incarcerated brothers and sisters, they release you and say, you have paid your debt to society. Why don't we cash that in? We don't address that. We don't have that narrative. Nobody is challenging that. If Brother Desmond has paid his debt, he owes nobody nothing. He should be restored to his full rights of being a citizen. But the narrative, nobody addresses that. When we can go back in and make people understand, we heard you when you said that I have paid my debt to society. I don't owe society anything. I don't deserve those labels that you place on me. You said that about 30 minutes ago. I don't deserve to be relegated as a non-person. I want a piece of paper. I want a certificate or something that says I don't owe you nothing. I paid my debt, and I didn't create that. They created that. So if they created that, why then don't we hold them accountable to that? Succinctly in that whole ideology of your debt is paid. If it's paid, it's paid. All this other. Michael Vick, as you said, went to jail for participating in dog fighting. Now, I'm an animal lover. Trust me, I love animals. I love dogs. But you got Michael Vick going to jail for dog fighting and hold that against him for the rest of his life. And the dog can get more come help me donate money than anything else on TV. But when it comes to human rights, they squeeze one in. It's an abomination before God because God said we're to have dominion over the earth, right? People are supposed to be held accountable for their infractions, and I understand that. But anytime our ideology as a country gives more significance and priority to animals than they do to human beings, that's part of the reason why we're in the middle of a mess we're in right now. Got to look at what our priorities are.
We cannot, and I was talking on this the other day, right? Because even when you look at our penal system, right, that human beings are put in conditions that's not even fit even for animals, right? Humans are not meant to be in cages, and when we haven't even kids that are put in solitary confinement, right? And the type of conditions they were at one point, they were shackling pregnant women and allowing women to go through cycles without even having any kind of sanitary material. And it was just horrific. But at the end of the day, it's how are we seeing the humanity in folks, right? And when you have a narrative that's pushing felon, that's pushing convict, that's pushing criminal, right? Then people get the mindset that if you hear, oh, they watching TV, oh, those criminals shouldn't even be having TV. They have it too easy, and this and that, right? Totally forgetting that that's someone that we love. When we've seen it, even with the COVID pandemic, how people they were responding to people who were incarcerated, right? That the government could have done more to protect people who were incarcerated, because that was a hot spot for the spread of the virus, right? But little to nothing was done, and they had so many people who lost their lives, right? Unnecessarily, right? And they weren't sentenced to a life sentence, but they end up getting that, right? For just because people did not see the humanity in it. And so that's very important. And it's not just the prisoner. It's the person that is homeless on the street. It's the person that's an addict. If we do not understand the importance of advocating for the least among us and empowering the least among us, right, we would never be as great as we aspire to be, and we would not have the type of community that we desire to have until that happens. And we just have to.
Yes, and we've talked about what we need to redefine. We've talked about one-sided narratives. We've talked about initiatives that you all lead to make this happen, and along with positive narratives and the importance of representation across all industries, across all professions and careers. And so with that said, I believe we noticed that Representative Escamani had to hop off for another meeting, and I'm mindful that Commissioner Regina Hill has to hop off as well, along with Commissioner Oliver. So we want to be respectful of your time. So with that said, I'd like to thank you all for joining me today, for having this conversation. Y'all made it easy. I had questions like, okay, cool. So on behalf of the DPFBLA officers and our chapter director, Ms. Connor, thank you for being here. Thank you for those who logged on as guests. We thank especially our visiting guest, Washington Post reporter and Pulitzer Prize winner Keith Alexander, for logging on. Los Angeles director of Toastmasters 1913, Elaine Moore, Mackenzie Galloway, and Theodore King. This has been an amazing series. Oh my goodness, it's the last day. But so thank y'all for making it leaving.
Thank you so much. And I definitely want to add thank you to Commissioner Regina Hill for actually being an example of what can happen in our communities when we empower people and give people second chances, and the things that she's brought to District 5 that's actually making a difference. And so I definitely want to make sure I point that out.
She's been through something, so she knows what she's doing, and she knows what she's. She knows I'm one of her favorite supporters, and I've never lived in her district, but she knows what I think about her. And you just doing it. You keep doing it.
We're all in this together. This work isn't done in a silo, and I really appreciate all you guys' leadership and being there in the trenches and in being in boardrooms. As I say, the work has no color. The work has no title. What we are servants, and we've been called for a time such as this. And thank you to the students that's out there now continuing to work, because the next generation must carry on. We're just opening up doors and access, right? And that's what I think our mantle is, to give access and opportunities to the next generation. So it's been a pleasure sitting here and being amongst you all great leaders, and continue to lead, Shan. Continue to lead.
Thank you all for opening the doors, and have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Good night. Happy weekend.
Good night.